Hi everyone, in this video I'm building a low profile home theater PC case. I built one a few weeks back, but it didn't come out that great. This one will be a bit narrower, using a low profile GPU, but still with enough hard drive space to use it as a home file server or NAS. I'll be using pine to build it, but I'm going to try my hand at staining the wood for the first time. Milling is boring, so I'm just gonna glance over it. I'm starting with the groove for the epoxy stripe on the front. I used way too much double-sided tape, so I'm adding some masking tape to the wood to easily remove the template from the workpiece. I'm not making a hole for the epoxy, just a groove about 9mm deep. This way I don't have to deal with a mold and cork and all that stuff, and I'm not planning on using any RGB inside the case, so there's no need for light to shine through. I made this epoxy strip way narrower since the previous one was too big, but I think I made it a bit too small this time. So this time I marked and drilled the fan holes in the correct positions. This hole saw is slightly off center, not sure if it shows in the video, so it gets stuck every now and then. I do learn from my mistakes, so this time the double-sided tape strips are much smaller. To reduce the mess, I removed most of the material with a coping saw before using the router, but as you can see here, it's still a big mess. This small and very cheap router doesn't have a dust adapter. There were some minor burn marks because I took too long in the corners, but I sanded them out pretty quick. I actually own proper drill stops, the type you screw into the drill bit, but I was too lazy and I just grabbed some tape and I drilled too far, so now the fans will be screwed in from the front of the case instead of the back side. But as you will see, it actually turned out pretty well. It was a happy little accident, like your little brother that is 12 years younger than all the other siblings. This time I didn't screw up the grooves where the top and bottom will fit into. Since I'm going to stain the case, I have to get the pieces to their final dimensions and stain them before I can glue and assemble the case. If I glued and assembled the case first, any glue on the surface will stand out as white stains against the stained wood. I'm cutting the sides and top a bit closer to their final dimensions, but I still leave a few millimeters that I will remove with the plain or flush trim router. I'm adding these blocks to hold the top in place with some threaded inserts. I wanted to build a full function PC with all the slots at the back so I can install additional network cards and for the GPU. So I 3D printed this backplate for the I/O and power supply. I also wanted to see what is the difference between spray paint and hand painting it with acrylic. It definitely wasn't as smooth as spray paint, but it was cheaper. I think if I applied multiple layers of paint and I did a light sanding between layers, it would be a lot smoother. But this will be the back of the case sitting under my TV, so no one will ever see it. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to assemble the case and get it to final dimensions and then stain it. So instead of gluing it all together like I usually do, I'll be using these metal brackets to keep it in place. I'm thinking next time I build a case, I will do the 3D printed parts last. That way I can build the case and then adjust the size of the 3D printed parts easily to fit the case instead of sanding them down as it is 1mm too big. I used to go through a whole process to make smaller holes in the top of the case and larger ones in the bottom blocks to house a threaded insert, but since this top is held in place by the grooves in the sides, I'm going to try something simpler. I just made a large hole through the top and the wooden block to fit the size of the threaded insert. I'm not sure if this will work for vertical side panels since they could slide down if pressure is applied. Since pine is so soft, pressing the threaded insert with a clamp worked pretty well. Using a plane to make the side flush to the top is so much easier than a router, and there's less of a chance to mess it up. And you also get these cool looking pigtail shavings. Pine being so soft is a blessing and a curse. It makes it easy to work with hand tools, but it is so soft the bearing on the router bit will mar the surface, so I added some tape which had the unfortunate side effect of being chewed up and getting stuck in the bearing of the router bed. I don't like working with a router because of the mess, but if you have proper dust extraction on it, there's actually very little mess. Sanding is boring, what else can I say? I sanded the wood up to 180 and the epoxy up to 3000 grit. I'm using Seekins gel stain, not sponsored or anything. I just like the color and I could buy this small little tin which is more than enough for a PC case. The color really pops once you add the second layer. For the bottom, I'm only adding one coat, no one will see it. Now that it is stained, I can actually assemble it. I made this Frankenstein overhang thing because I don't have an assembly table and I'm too lazy to make one. Plus I'll need a place to store it and I have limited space. I glued the 3D printed parts to the case using quick dry epoxy. I'm finishing it with polyurethane. I'm assuming wax wouldn't work on the gel stain, but I didn't actually research. For best results you should give it a light sand between coats and apply multiple coats. But I was lazy and gave it one coat since it will be under the TV and you won't be up close to it. This time I used a hole transfer punch to try and line up the holes for the motherboard risers a bit better. And I used a proper depth stop instead of tape to make sure I don't drill through the bottom, although it wouldn't really matter since no one will see it. I add a bit of CA glue to the bottom of the hole and smack the threaded inserts in with a nail punch and hammer. To make it easier to fit the fans, I added this fan mesh holder to sit between the mesh and the fan. Due to an earlier screw up, I will be screwing in the fans from the front. I'm using Molex fans just for testing. I don't recommend using them since you can't control the speed. They just run 100% the whole time, I think. I didn't paint the hard drive cages since they are black already and you won't be able to see them. I left enough space to reach the screws on the side of the drive gauge so you can change drives without removing anything. Just be very careful when you use an impact driver with PLA parts. They don't compress very well and will crack if you drive the screw in too far. Looking at it from this angle, you can make the case quite a bit smaller if you remove some of the empty space, but you might struggle more to attach cables and change drives and so forth. I'm using this GTX 7010 just to test the slot location. I'll get a better GPU later on. And there she is. Good enough to have it in the living room without bringing shame to my family. Now this is a new channel and I'm still working out the format of the videos. It feels to me like there are like 1,000 small steps to building a PC case, and for now I'm trying to explain them as I go along instead of playing music. But let me know in the comments what you think about the format and length, since I used fast forward quite a bit and I try to keep the video a reasonable length. Thank you for watching, see you next time.